3 weeks before my mother-in-law publicly volunteered my husband to pay for an $800 birthday dinner, I quietly shut down the account she planned to use. She did not know it. My husband did not know it. And as I sat across from 14 smiling guests in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, I realized something important. For years I had been waiting for people to respect my boundaries. That night, I stopped waiting. My name is Hannah Brooks. I am 31 years old, a certified public accountant, and numbers have always made more sense to me than people. Numbers tell the truth. They do not manipulate, guilt trip, exaggerate, or conveniently forget. They simply record what happened. That skill became the reason I finally saw what was happening in my marriage. I had been married to my husband, Ryan, for 3 years. Before that, we dated for 2. For 5 years, I loved a man who genuinely cared about me, but who had one enormous blind spot. He could never say no to his mother. His mother, Diane, was 63 years old and had spent most of Ryan's life convincing him that taking care of her was his responsibility. At first, I thought she was kind and welcoming. During our first Christmas together, she hugged me and told everyone how grateful she was that Ryan had found someone responsible and practical. At the time, I thought she was complimenting my character. Years later, I realized she was complimenting my earning potential. The financial requests started small, they always do. 1 month her car needed repairs. Another month her property fees were due. Then Ryan's younger sister Megan needed help buying furniture for her new baby. Somehow those expenses always found their way into our accounts. Whenever I questioned it, Ryan had the same answer. Family helps family. I wanted to be supportive, so I agreed. The first few times felt reasonable. Nobody wants to be the selfish spouse who refuses to help family during a difficult moment. The problem was that the difficult moments never stopped. By the 2nd year of our marriage, Diane was calling Ryan constantly with new emergencies. A leaking roof, vacation deposits, medical expenses that later turned out not to be medical expenses at all. Membership fees, home repairs, last-minute bills. There was always something. At first, I tried discussing it calmly. Ryan would listen. He would nod. Then he would transfer the money anyway. Eventually, I stopped arguing. Instead, I started documenting. That is what accountants do when something feels wrong. One evening, after Ryan went to sleep, I opened my laptop and began reviewing our accounts. I expected the total to be a few $1,000s. I was wrong, very wrong. After tracking every transfer, every payment, every shared expense connected to his family, I stared at a number that made my chest tighten. $19,412. Nearly $20,000 had left our accounts in just 2 years. I reviewed everything twice because I thought I had made a mistake. I had not. The number was real. The dates were real. The transactions were real. The pattern was real. That spreadsheet changed everything. For months afterward, I could not stop thinking about it. It was not even the money itself that bothered me most. It was what the money represented. Every transaction reflected a decision Ryan had made without treating me as an equal partner. Every time I expressed concern, I was told it was temporary. Every time I compromised, the boundary moved further. Eventually I realized something uncomfortable. The problem was not just Diane. The problem was that I had allowed the pattern to continue. For months before Diane's birthday dinner, I scheduled a consultation with a family law attorney. I was not filing for divorce, I simply wanted information. I wanted to understand my rights and my options. The meeting was eye-opening. For the first time, I stopped thinking about what everyone else wanted and started thinking about what I needed. A week later, I opened a separate bank account. 6 weeks later, I redirected my paycheck into it. Then I paid off my portion of our shared credit card and quietly closed the account. I never announced any of it. I never threatened anyone. I simply prepared. The birthday dinner arrived on a Saturday evening. Diane had chosen an upscale steakhouse known for charging ridiculous prices. She invited 14 people, including relatives, friends, neighbors, and several people I barely knew. Ryan mentioned the dinner 2 weeks beforehand. He described it as a family celebration. He never mentioned who would be paying. He did not need to. I already knew exactly how the evening would end, or at least, how everyone expected it to end. The restaurant was crowded and elegant. Crystal glasses reflected warm light across the room. Servers moved gracefully between tables carrying expensive bottles of wine. Diane was already seated when we arrived. She looked thrilled. She wore a sparkling top and sat at the head of the table like a queen hosting a royal banquet. When Ryan walked in, she immediately lit up. She hugged him tightly. I received a quick side embrace before she turned her attention back to her guests. The evening unfolded exactly as I expected. Diane ordered appetizers for everyone without asking. She selected expensive bottles of wine. She encouraged guests to try premium menu items. People laughed. Stories were shared. The bill grew larger with every passing minute. I remained quiet. I watched. I waited. About 90 minutes later, dessert plates were cleared and Diane tapped her wine glass with a spoon. The conversation stopped. She stood and thanked everyone for attending. Then she smiled at Ryan. It was a smile I had seen countless times before. A smile filled with confidence. A smile that assumed success. Then she delivered the line she had probably planned all evening. She said her son always took wonderful care of his family and would be covering the dinner. Everyone laughed. Several guests applauded. Ryan smiled politely. Then he reached for my purse. For years we had followed the same routine. Whenever a bill arrived, he reached for whichever card we used jointly. It had become automatic. He opened my purse, pulled out the card, walked to the payment machine, and inserted it. I watched calmly. The machine rejected it. A short mechanical beep echoed through the silence. Ryan frowned and tried again. Another rejection. His shoulders stiffened. Diane leaned forward. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Ryan forced a smile and returned to the table. His voice was low when he spoke. "Do you have another card?" I looked at the card in his hand. Then I looked directly at him. "That account is closed." His expression froze. "What?" "I closed it 3 weeks ago." The entire table became silent. Diane hearing seemed to sharpen instantly. Ryan stared at me. "What are you talking about?" I kept my voice calm. "I can explain later. That card does not work anymore." He glanced around the table. 14 people were now pretending not to listen while obviously listening to every word. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. "Do you have another card?" "Yes." He extended his hand. For a moment I looked at it. Then I thought about 3 years of frustration, 3 years of compromise, 3 years of being treated like an unlimited resource. And finally, I shook my head. "I have another card, but I am not giving it to you." A stunned silence followed. Diane slowly lowered her wine glass. "Excuse me." I stood from my chair, not angrily, not dramatically, simply calmly. I walked over to the server myself. I handed her my personal card. The card connected only to my separate account. Then I instructed her to process the entire bill. When I returned to the table, everyone looked uncomfortable. Everyone except me. For the first time all evening, I felt completely at peace. Diane was the first to speak. "That is certainly one way to make a scene at someone's birthday dinner." I smiled politely. "I did not make a scene. I paid the bill. You embarrassed my son. I paid $847 for your celebration. I think your son survived." A few guests looked away to hide their reactions. One nearly laughed. Diane's face tightened. "After everything this family has done for you." That sentence finally pushed me to respond. Not emotionally, professionally. I have a spreadsheet. The words landed like a thunderclap. "What?" "I keep records. It is literally my profession." I opened a document saved on my phone. Then I placed it in the center of the table. $19,412. Every transfer, every payment, every family expense, every dollar. I explained that I had tracked all of it over 2 years. Then I asked a simple question. "When you say everything this family has done for me, what exactly do you mean?" Because according to my records, the financial support has only moved in one direction. Nobody spoke. The table became so quiet that I could hear dishes clinking from nearby tables. Ryan sat frozen. Diane stared at the spreadsheet. For the first time in years, nobody had a response. Nobody could argue with documentation. Finally, Ryan spoke. "Hannah," I gently interrupted him. "I am not trying to humiliate anyone. I'm trying to solve a problem that has existed for years." Diane immediately turned toward her son. "Are you going to let her talk to me like this?" Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I met him, he did not rush to defend his mother. Something had changed. Maybe it was the spreadsheet. Maybe it was the failed payment. Maybe it was finally seeing the consequences in public. Whatever the reason, he remained silent. 20 minutes later, Diane left the restaurant. She barely acknowledged me. Megan gathered her baby and followed shortly afterward. The evening ended quietly. The drive home did not. For nearly half an hour, Ryan said nothing. Finally, he spoke. "You could have told me." I laughed softly. "I did tell you. Several times." He stared through the windshield. "The account, when did you close it?" 3 weeks ago. "Were you going to tell me?" "After tonight." He absorbed that answer quietly. Then he asked the question I had been expecting. "Are you leaving me?" I looked out the window before answering. "I honestly do not know. But something has to change. Not eventually. Not after the next emergency. Now." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything either of us had said. Then Ryan admitted something surprising. "I did not realize it was $19,000. I nodded. "That is exactly the problem." The next morning, I emailed Diane the spreadsheet. I attached a short message. I told her I did not want conflict. I told her I was willing to have a healthy relationship, but I would no longer participate in one built around financial expectations. She read it immediately, then ignored it for 11 days. When she finally responded, her message contained only 4 words. "We should talk soon." For the first time, I did not rush to answer. I waited, not out of revenge, out of self-respect. Ryan and I eventually began couples counseling. The conversations were difficult, sometimes painful, sometimes surprisingly honest. For the first time, we discussed issues we had spent years avoiding. I do not know how our story ends. Maybe our marriage survives. Maybe it does not. But I know exactly when my life changed. It changed the moment I stopped hoping someone else would fix the pattern and accepted that I had to break it myself. The most important thing I learned was that boundaries are not created by speeches. They are created by actions, by preparation, by clarity, by following through when the uncomfortable moment finally arrives. That birthday dinner was not about money. It was about value. For years, I measured my worth by how useful I could be to other people, how much I could give, how much I could tolerate, how much I could sacrifice. That night I stopped doing that. I paid the bill, I told the truth, and I walked out of that restaurant feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I won, not because anyone lost, but because for the first time in a very long time, I finally stood up for myself. And once you experience that feeling, it becomes impossible to forget.